Welcome everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode in the 2025 e-bike Lite shootout. Today, we're gonna be talking about the Polygon Collosus TLE. Let's see how this bike performs. So before we dive into the on-trail performance of the Polygon and where it stands out, we'd like to take a moment to thank our partners who have made this series possible. We have 13 bikes that we've been testing as part of this shootout. A big crew and a lot of hours have gone into this series. So thanks to them for making this possible. And of course, for you guys for watching. Without all your support, we wouldn't be able to do this. So we have outfitted all of the bikes with Schwalbe's radial construction tires. We have an Albert Gravity out back and a Magic Mary Gravity up front.
Endura has kitted us out with both some warm and cold weather gear for these changing fall temperatures. Giro has kept our feet glued to the pedals and our knees safe when we run out of talent.
And lastly, we would like to thank our host destination, Klamath Falls, Oregon. We are back again for another awesome year of riding here in Klamath Falls. And thanks to the Running Y Resort, a bike-friendly lodging accommodation scenario with hotels, houses, a golf course, and amazing trails just minutes away. So let's get into how this bike performs. So in an effort to keep this already long video a little bit shorter, we're not going to recite all the geo numbers and hope that you guys can read charts yourself. So we will link that down below. You can head to theloamwolf.com and see all the numbers you want to stare at. We're going to focus on what you can't read on a chart, which is how the bike rides. So first up, let's talk about the drive unit test that we conducted on all of our drive units back home before heading here. 13-mile loop, 1,300 feet of elevation. On the Bosch units, we did pre and post update consumption tests. So Sean, take it away there.
Yeah, so our rider was 195 pounds, riding exclusively in that turbo mode. Pre-update, he used about 300 watt hours of battery and finished that loop in an hour and 3 minutes.
And change.
And change, yep. Gotta count those seconds. And post-update, things changed quite a bit. He used up 388 watt hours of that 400 watt hour battery, but the loop time did come down quite a bit to about 59 minutes.
It's important to note the update is a 5 Newton meter increase and also a top speed increase that motor will give you assistance up to. So it's I would say small change for that, but a big change for range.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. And of course, the Bosch Flow e-bike app is pretty easy to use. So as obviously you could tell by 13 miles and 1,300 feet, using up 388 watts of your 400 watt hour battery is not really manageable for us trying to put in big days of testing and filming. So we ended up tuning down, going back to a pre-update scenario and even tuning down a little bit more in some of the lower power modes.
And as Drew has said before, if you are looking for that ultra fast climb experience, you might not be in the market for an SLE bike.
Yeah, unless your rides are short and fast, right? I mean, because you could definitely burn this thing out in an hour. But yeah, you can also maximize it because we have definitely put in some, several thousand foot days on this 400 watt hour battery, or you can kill it in an hour. But yeah, so speaking of climbing, let's talk a little bit about geo, suspension feel, and how this bike does on the way up.
Yeah, I found this bike to have a fair amount of traction. I've felt like I could get my weight really centered on it, and today we did a pretty techie, steppy climb, which usually I'm not great at, and just powered up at my first try. I was like, wow, like that came quite easy, and I really utilize the overrun that these Bosch systems have, which is something that is lacking from the other systems. And once you understand how to make it benefit you, I think it's a really good aid in climbing.
Sean, thoughts for you?
It was quick, fairly quiet, and I was in a relatively comfortable seated position. A couple components changed a little bit of hand comfort.
Yeah, the bar and stem on this bike are definitely not comfortable. We've got like these D3O grips on here, which did take a little bit of the sting out of the handlebars, and the stock grips were definitely not forgiving in any way, especially in unison with that handlebar setup, but you know, an easy enough thing to change on your own, I'd say. For me, I thought that the overall, you know, seated climbing position was pretty standard. Like nothing stood out as great, nothing was lacking. It just was like, it just feels like a mountain bike that I can get on and I can go pedal, and nothing screamed great or horrible at the same time.
Which isn't a bad thing.
No, it just was a bike you could get on and ride, and that was that. So moving into like some of the cornering, handling, jumping, descending attributes.
It corners very predictably, like a very predictable in the corners. I would say I was hoping for a little bit more plush experience. Having that Colosus name makes me think of the downhill bike we had in our group test, and that bike was like just so ultra plush and sensitive, and I found this to be a little bit firmer. Now, with that said, we have had some oil and some residue build up on the bottom of the shock, so that there may be something going on internally there that's causing that throughout the many miles and hard miles we've put on these. But as a whole, I found that as I got up to speed and really started pushing into that mid-stroke, it did smooth out a bit.
So something I will say is, you know, this bike, yes, it has the Colosus name, which is, I guess, the enduro bike and the DH bike. And it could be easy for some to mistake it as being part of that family. It is, however, just 140 millimeters of travel out back. And it shares the Colosus name because it has that IFS, you know, 6-bar suspension platform, not because of its intentions as a descending or downhill bias bike. So that's worth noting. You know, so on one hand, I could see where Polygon would want to keep it in the Colosus name. On the other hand, you know, it's maybe a little bit closer to like the Siskiyou in terms of intentions and on-trail attributes. But for a 140 bike, how did you think the suspension performed?
It was impressive for 140.
Okay.
I would say the Marin was a little bit more plush in the way that it handled some of the kind of medium-sized hits, but when it came to bigger hits and really pressing into deeper into the stroke, it was very smooth.
Okay. Sean, how about you?
Yeah, so I mean, I hopped on it and just completely forgot what the travel numbers were and was riding it like all the other big bikes that I've been on prior to this. So like after we got through some of those sustained rock gardens, I was like, oh man, that was a little bit rougher than I was expecting, but it wasn't too bad. And then the travel numbers clicked back in my head and I was like, oh yeah, it's a shorter travel bike. So, but after we got through that and then the trail kind of opened up, got a bit more flowy, and the impacts weren't so sustained, this thing really shined and just ripped down the hill.
Okay. So you were digging it overall?
Pretty much. I mean, yeah, I mean, once I kind of just tried to tune out the cockpit feel, like the suspension platform, I think was pretty impressive.
Okay. Amongst all the other bikes, would you say it's something like one of your more notable or something you like better than some of the others?
I wouldn't go there. Like it's just, I feel like it's still very middle of the road, like, but it just worked well.
Okay.
So like I don't have a lot of complaints on the platform itself.
Okay. I think actually the bike does pretty well. Again, for a 140 rear end, like I'm pretty happy with it. Nothing, again, screamed amazing. Nothing said I'm at the back of the pack. You know, it kind of just blended in as like this is a capable, pretty well-rounded bike that just works. And yeah, I mean, for better or worse, right? It just did what it was supposed to do, and it didn't scream at me one way or the other. So, you know, in that sense, like, I don't know, we have a lot of bikes that are saying, I'm amazing here, but maybe somewhere else are like, ooh, this isn't where I want to be. And this bike kind of just always felt like, yeah, I'm willing to do whatever you want me to do, and let's just keep cruising.
I didn't find it to be the most playful. I found it to kind of cater towards more of the rough descents than kind of the flick and play side, which is something that I kind of expected going into it, so that wasn't a huge surprise.
Do you think the 46.5-pound weight compared to some of the others in the 44 to 45 had anything to do with it, or is it the suspension?
I mean, I would say that the weight does have a little bit to do with it. I would say the geometry package as a whole, and maybe bottom bracket height altogether, just doesn't make it the most agile. It's hard to kind of nail down one thing because it is good, it's not great. And it's something that I can flick and play, but I have to be a little bit more mindful about my body position and where I am weighting the bike in those scenarios.
Okay. overall fit, finish, value, kind of final thoughts, who the bike's for maybe.
So at $62.99, I think it's a good value. You're getting a carbon frame, electronic shifting. Yes, you are getting Marzocchi mid base level suspension, but I don't think that really held me back putting this bike through what it is designed to be put through. That price range leaves some budget to be able to upgrade the bars and things like that. And for a carbon frame bike at that price, I think Polygon has done a good job with their spec.
It's one of the most unique looking carbon frames that we have on S2.
I love the seat mast and like that whole area. I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, I personally am a fan of how it looks, and like the split top tube, you know, doesn't really serve a function. I guess it helps and looking at sag, but maybe, but I do like the way the bike looks.
I mean, they really dial in on the fine touches too, like the mud guard in the back.
Yep.
The cable ports are pretty snug and quiet.
Yeah, so it was honestly a pretty quiet bike. All of the Bosch drive units have like that clackety kind of clutch sound that we've talked about, but I think otherwise the bike was silent. Like there wasn't a lot of cable rattle or noise.
We did have some noise out of the brakes, which was not just the Maguras on this bike, it was also another test bike. Something we've talked about, that while we love the kind of feel and modulation, they just lack a little bit of that bite and like end of stroke ramp or progressivity that say the Mavens do, right? So there is something to be a little bit desired there. If you're looking for something that's super bitey, you're not gonna get those out of these brakes.
Yeah, we definitely have struggled a bit. We've changed pads, we've done some bleeds. On several test bikes, not just this Polygon, but yeah, it seems like we just, I normally like Magura brakes, but something recently has changed and I'm not getting that same feeling I used to have out of them. But other than that, the Bosch charge port cover on this fell out a couple of times. It's like kind of the older style, like push in, just a little rubber cover. So that's like something that was, a lot of the other brands are doing little stuff like custom charge port covers that swivel out of the way or flip open that are like magnetized. And like, that's where you start to, differentiate bikes that like all ride pretty darn good, but like little features and things like that kind of separate tiers of bikes. So, it's small, but at this point we kind of have to start criticizing and nitpicking something, as we're working our way through this test. Yeah, overall, like I think this is a pretty solid package. To me, I would say it's, maybe for the rider who, Polygon and Bikes Online, which is their North American distributor, and I think also Australia, they regularly are doing sales. So you could probably swoop up one of these bikes at a pretty good discount. There is even a model below this, and that would allow you even more budget down the road to upgrade. I think it's a good starting platform, a good base, mid-power SL, e-bike that will let you kind of get into the e-bike world if you haven't gotten in there yet, or maybe you're just looking to add one to the quiver that's like not going to break the bank, as crazy as that sounds at, still several $1,000s. But yeah, I think it's a capable bike. It's a good suspension platform, and overall it's just kind of happy doing whatever you want it to do. Maybe doesn't just excel and scream the best in class anywhere, but also doesn't say, I hate being here and I'm not doing this very well either. So yeah, that is the Polygon Collosus TLE. Thanks again to Schwalbe Endura, Giro, the Running Y Resort, and Klamath Falls, Oregon for hosting us on the shootout. Once again, thanks to you guys for watching, engaging, leaving comments, and sharing with your friends. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Stay tuned for the rest of this series. We got 13 bikes in total before our grand finale, so stay tuned, and we'll see you out on the trails.